There's a video on the internet with my marriage in it. Not just my marriage, the shell of it anyway, but my wife Loretta in a room that isn't ours, moving in a way I'd never seen her move, with a man I didn't recognize whose face was blurred. The footage had that sickly, silent clarity security cameras get, everything too sharp and too far away at the same time. I would never have known about it if my friend Mike hadn't found it by accident. We were at the Chili's in Port Authority, the least romantic place in Manhattan, when he slid his phone across the table, face down. His thumb hovered just long enough for me to notice his hand shake, a micro-tremor. I assumed he was about to show me some dumb meme, maybe a basketball clip. I'd been at work late, reading over compliance reviews until my eyes went star-shaped, and I honestly didn't want to talk, a fact that would, later, feel deeply ironic. "Jim, you need to watch this," he said, and his face was so careful I thought at first someone we both knew had died. It took me a few seconds to process what I was seeing. Cheap hotel bedsheets. A woman, her hair up, face angled away. Something about her posture, shoulders back, that little twist in her neck, felt so familiar it hurt to look. The camera's angle made her face visible just enough, in just a few frames. Unless you'd slept next to her for 11 years, you'd probably miss it. Mike was talking, saying, "I swear I didn't go looking. It just popped up in my inbox, one of those stupid chain things. You won't believe what New Yorkers are doing in your hotel rooms." And for a second I thought, that looks so much like Loretta, but he looked sick. Maybe it is. I didn't say anything. I wanted to put the phone face down and walk away. Instead, I pressed the video back to the beginning and watched the whole thing, my thumb numb from how hard I was holding the glass. That was the first thing that should have mattered. The numbness in my fingers, the sense that my body was switching off before my mind could catch up. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment the pattern started. Not with secrets, but with me looking for them. Before I tell you how everything came apart, subscribe to Reddit Ride for more stories where quiet suspicions turn into proof, and the people who thought they had control realize they never did. Loretta and I have been married for 11 years. Manhattan marriages are a little like real estate. You don't get the luxury of space, but you get proximity, friction, habits rubbing together until they either polish each other or spark. Our life was made of subway commutes and grocery deliveries, midtown coffee shops, the quiet routine of expensive gym memberships we barely used. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side, a place where the dishwasher worked only when it wanted to. Loretta, 3 years younger than me, moved up to vice president of risk management at her bond insurance firm, while still finding time for her morning Peloton rides and Sunday evening bullet journals. Me, I worked compliance at a bank, never glamorous, always necessary. Together, we knew which bodega made the best egg sandwiches, where the takeout containers fit in the fridge, how to read the air when someone came home too tired for small talk. Our routines were the bones of our marriage. I made coffee first, she took the first shower. Breakfast together if she wasn't on an early Zoom. Weeknights were leftovers, sometimes shared with Netflix, sometimes sitting parallel at the dining table, each of us in our own laptop's blue glow. We exchanged the kind of banter you couldn't fake, little jokes about my stubborn socks or her guilty pleasure for trashy reality shows. Sometimes affection was a lopsided hug at the door, a kiss on the crown of her head as she tied her shoes. Sometimes it was just a look from across the street when she spotted me coming home. We each had our rhythms, but we moved together. At least that's what I believed. And when you believe something, you build a life on top of it. You invest in the wait. Seeing Loretta on that video was like finding a hairline crack in a wall I'd always assumed was solid. You tap it, you hear a hollow sound. For 2 days after Mike showed me the footage, I told myself every lie I needed to. People look like other people all the time. It's just a blurry video. She'd never do something like that. I watched her make her protein shake in the morning, watched her roll her eyes at the mess I left in the sink, and tried to see the secret in her gestures, but nothing in her expression gave anything away. I didn't say anything. Neither did Mike. He left town the next day for a work trip, and I didn't text back immediately when he checked in. I wanted to let the world settle. Loretta was busy with a client audit, Something about a risky muni bond that was going to sink a mid-market hospital, she said. She worked late, but that wasn't new. On Thursday night, she came home after 10 in an Uber. She was still in her navy skirt suit, hair pulled back so tightly her forehead shone beneath the recessed lights. She was quick to smile, quick to ask if I'd eaten. When I said I hadn't, she microwaved some leftovers for both of us and sat at the table, knees pressed lightly against mine. She talked about the new compliance guidelines making her life hell. Everything felt as it should. Everything was in its place. I looked for a mark on her face, or some sign of guilt under her makeup. There was nothing, and I was half convinced I'd invented the resemblance. I didn't want to be the husband who sniffed around for clues where there were none. That's what love is, or maybe just habit, the willingness to stick with your own denial at least for a while. The first real clue wasn't a video. It was a bruise, small, nearly hidden at the outer crest of her thigh. I noticed it when she bent to move laundry from the washer to the dryer. She was in yoga pants, the kind that left nothing to speculation, and when I glanced past her hip I saw a purple-blue smudge, faded along the edges, stark on her otherwise pale skin. "You okay?" I asked, voice casual. She looked up fast. "Too fast." "What, on your leg?" I pointed, not touching. "Oh," she laughed, nervous and a little sharp. I banged into the conference room table. "Clumsy day." She smoothed her pants as if covering the bruise could erase the question. I nodded, not pressing. She didn't ask why I'd noticed. She left the room and didn't return for a full 15 minutes. Her explanation was plausible. It was possible anyway. And wanting something to be nothing can make a person very accommodating. After that, I began to notice things. Not all at once. They crept in, like mold at the corners of a window you almost never open. She started coming home later. Not every night, and not so late it would have been a crisis, but just enough to throw off our usual rhythm. Sometimes she'd text me at 8 p.m. saying, "Just go ahead and eat, long call with London." Sometimes it was an early morning workout at Equinox she didn't used to take. Sometimes it was her phone face down, then flipped into airplane mode to save battery. Her laughter changed. She laughed more often at shows she didn't used to find funny, and less often at my old jokes. I told myself it was stress. What else could explain it? The pressure at her job never really stopped, and her team had just shifted reporting structures, giving her more direct reports and a new manager who was notoriously cold. She said work was eating her alive, and some nights she'd fall into bed without changing, just lie there with her arm over her face, not moving for 10, 20 minutes. Other nights she'd come home energized, too loud, pouring herself wine before I even said hello. I convinced myself that this was what high-stakes work did to people. It made them inconsistent. It made them strange. One Friday, well after midnight, I woke up and realized Loretta wasn't in bed. I found her in the bathroom, sitting on the edge of the tub with her phone in her lap, light shining up. She didn't flinch when I knocked. "Can't sleep," I whispered. She didn't look up. Got pulled into a London Zoom. "Sorry, babe. You go back to bed. I'll join you in a minute." I went back to the bedroom and waited, listening for the sound of her feet down the hallway. When she finally came in, her face was shuttered tight. She pressed herself against me and fell asleep with my hand on her shoulder, as if nothing could be wrong. I remember thinking, for the first time, I don't know my wife as well as I thought I did. Some days the world righted itself. She'd come home on time, we'd take a walk to Riverside Park, trade stories about absurd coworkers and neighbors. I needed those days and held on to them, the way you hold an edge when you feel yourself slipping. There was still affection, still the old banter. But under all of it, I'd feel the echo of that cold hotel room caught on camera, a parallel world, a second skin on our life. What I didn't know yet was that the pattern didn't just involve another man. It was shapeless, plural, something harder to confront. The pressure at Loretta's job continued to escalate. Stress at her firm bred longer hours, angrier emails, even weekend conference calls. She came home smelling of different perfumes sometimes, something heavy and musky, not the citrusy spray she usually used. Once, on a Sunday afternoon, she left our table at a crowded coffee shop 3 times to answer calls outside. Each time, her voice was tense, but she brushed it off with a story about an urgent regulatory complaint. It was about this time the gym bag started staying in her trunk. She had always changed at home, but now she'd keep it in the car for days, sometimes disappearing for workouts that seemed to run too close to the time she claimed to be at her office. She started showering at odd hours, coming home, beelining for the bathroom, closing the door and locking it in a way she never had before. When she came out, her expressions would be tight and distant, the kind you wear after an argument or a difficult confession, only we hadn't spoken at all. I counted nights she was home for dinner on one hand. She was rarely late enough to cause real suspicion, but always late enough to keep me guessing. Around this time, my friend Mike returned from his work trip. I hadn't spoken to him since the video. He looked at me uneasily over beers at Dive 75. "You ever ask Loretta about that video?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "Don't think there's anything to ask." He let that sit, a long, silent question he didn't need to say out loud before switching topics. But the video was lodged in my mind, like a piece of glass you learn to work around. I started watching for more clues, even ones that didn't fit, just to see if there was a pattern. One night, home alone and unable to sleep, I opened one of her recent paperbacks. She's always reading, usually economic thrillers or memoirs by CEOs, and a small folded piece of copier paper fell out. On it was a phone number I didn't recognize and the name, Room 218, scribbled in a rushed, unfamiliar hand. I tucked it back without reading more. The explanations were running out. Soon after, a neighbor, Christina, from down the hall, stopped me in the lobby to ask about Loretta's new running group. She'd seen Loretta returning in workout clothes with a man who didn't look like me. "Nice guy," she added, tall, maybe 30, wore a DeWitt construction sweatshirt. "You guys have friends in the building now?" I shook my head. "Not that I know of," Christina laughed it off. Later, I asked Loretta who the man was. She claimed he was a prospective client, and she'd run into him after her workout in Central Park. "It's networking, Jim. Sometimes you have to meet people where they are." She didn't look me in the eye. It was a plausible lie, not a dramatic one. That was what made it work. The turning point was a Tuesday in October. I got home before Loretta, sorting through our junk mail, when her iPad started chiming on the kitchen counter. She'd forgotten to log out of her email and a notification preview flashed up. "Reservation confirmed. The Gansevoort 3 hours 6:45 p.m. Ms. Parker." MS. Parker was her mother's maiden name, a detail Loretta sometimes used for security questions. I opened the full message. The reservation was for a day use suite. No mention of collaborators, just her name and a generic confirmation. When she came home, she was smiling, a little breathless, apologizing for missing my text. She dropped her gym bag on the floor, headed for the shower. I noticed a new bruise on her upper arm, almost hidden by her sleeve. That night, I started writing down the details in a password-protected note on my phone. Times, dates, receipts, every discrepancy. I stopped making excuses for her. My heart was cold. Everything was data now. I did not confront her then. I was not ready to be handled. There was no sense in waging a personal investigation. My day job was compliance, not surveillance, and I knew better than to risk getting played by my own anxiety. I hired a private investigator named Shepard. Bland, methodical, expensive. Not the kind of guy who got his hands dirty or promised anything Hollywood. I gave him the notes, the hotel names, the times when Loretta's stories didn't add up. The wait was hollow and slow, every day stretched with tension. I went to work, came home, cooked for myself. I stopped touching Loretta as much. I told her I was tired. Sometimes she tried to make up for it, ordering dessert, pulling me into spontaneous TV marathons, slipping into bed and whispering, "Just us tonight, okay?" In a way I wanted to believe. But I didn't trust it. I was running an audit on my life and finding bad assets everywhere. Shepard's report arrived 3 weeks later, in a slim envelope hand-delivered to my office. The summary was precise: 6 different hotels, all booked under aliases or with cash. No repeat visitors. The men did not match. Sometimes older, sometimes younger, different economic classes, no obvious connection. Surveillance photos from lobbies confirmed it was Loretta each time. On 3 separate occasions, she arrived with a gym bag and left hours later in different clothes. One of the hotel encounters included a man who matched our neighbor's description, a construction worker from our building, seen entering separately but exiting just behind her. Shepard's conclusion was unvarnished. Anonymous encounters, no ongoing relationship. Pattern suggests deliberate effort to avoid repeat connections and prevent discovery. Another kind of betrayal altogether. Not love, not passion, but a hunger for risk packaged as routine. I sat at my desk long past dark, reading and rereading the report. I was methodical about it, highlighting details, cross-referencing them with my phone's calendar, checking receipts and messages for gaps. Once I saw the pattern, I could not unsee it. I thought about the bruise, the scent, the laughter that changed, the way she locked the bathroom door. Each detail lined up like dominoes. I did not allow myself an outburst. I allowed myself certainty. Loretta's job had never been more demanding or more precarious. Any whisper of impropriety could destroy her. The irony tasted like salt. I had the evidence, and she had the most to lose. I met with an attorney the next morning. I explained the situation quietly, without melodrama. The advice was clinical: gather everything. Back up the pie report, duplicate bank records, document all schedules. Divorce could be clean if I wanted it. If I wanted more, repercussions for her infidelity or for her professional standing, a leak to her firm might suffice. But that wasn't my style. Vengeance was for people who needed to fill the hollow. I just wanted out, with my self-respect intact. I began separating finances, opening my own account, pulling back on shared credit cards. Loretta noticed and asked about it one night, but I shrugged and mumbled something about reorganizing for the new year. She believed me. I made my plans for a confrontation. Her firm was hosting a charity fundraiser at a hotel ballroom, a high-gloss event just adjacent to her work world. Lawyers, finance people, PR reps, board members. It was the kind of gathering where appearances were currency, and everyone smiled a little too hard for the photos. I arranged to arrive late, alone. I wore a suit she'd bought for our 10th anniversary, a detail that felt petty but satisfying. As I walked through the revolving doors, she spotted me from across the room, eyes flickering with recognition, then caution. I smiled a tight-lipped smile and made my way to her side. We played our parts for a few minutes, chatting with her boss, laughing at the right moments, making nice with board members. I waited until she was alone, topping up her glass at the bar. "Jim," she said softly, "what's going on?" I handed her an envelope. She recognized the attorney's letterhead before she even opened it. Her hand shook just a little. "Loretta," I said, voice low and level, "I know about the hotels, the gym bags, the anonymous men, including our neighbor. I have everything." She opened her mouth, closed it. The music in the background faded. The people behind us blurred into wallpaper. I kept my tone flat, controlled. "You don't need to lie. I don't need an explanation. But you need to understand, I've protected myself. Our assets are split. My attorney is copied on everything. Your career doesn't need to end. As long as you don't try to fight me, this stays between us. Try anything else, and your firm will receive the report. Consider this a professional courtesy." She dropped her eyes. Her breath came fast and uneven. Then finally she looked at me, really looked. Her composure shattered for the first time. She spoke 3 words. I needed it, that was it. No apology. No plea for forgiveness. Just the naked, ugly truth. I let the moment hang. "So did I said. I left her at the bar, shoulders curled inward, watching her own life shrink smaller than she'd ever let it become. The marriage ended before the paperwork did. Loretta slept at a friend's for the weeks it took to separate our lives. She made no attempt at reconciliation. Our neighbors talked. Word about the separation got out. At her firm, the rumors stayed just below the surface, but she walked through her hallways with her head lower than usual. A couple of board members stopped looking her in the eye at meetings. She never mentioned the affair partner again. My routines changed immediately. I cooked for one. Weekends stretched out, at first painfully, then quietly. The apartment felt empty, but not haunted. Dinners out with Mike returned, only with fewer long silences. Loretta's social circle rearranged itself. She was still at her firm for now, but the air around her had changed. She lost the glow that came from being on top of her world. No more laughter at my jokes. No more late-night apologies. In the end, our divorce was a footnote in a newsletter at her company. Best wishes to Loretta in her next chapter, and never more than that. Looking back, it was the pattern that broke me, not any single man. Not the video, or the bruises, or even the envelope at the fundraiser. It was living with the slow erosion of trust, the disciplined way I cataloged her betrayals, one data point at a time. I realized I'd spent so long looking for reassurance that I forgot what certainty felt like. Even now, I keep the pie's file in a locked drawer. Not out of spite, but because part of me prefers proof to memory. I'm not grateful for how it happened, but I am grateful it's over. Quiet acceptance, that's the best dignity you get in the end. If you stayed with me until the end, subscribe and leave a comment. It helps Reddit Ride grow and keeps these stories coming. The quiet betrayals, the cold discoveries, and the moments where someone finally stops pretending not to see the truth. I may not have chosen how Loretta betrayed me, but I chose how it ended. And in the end, I walked out standing tall, knowing the truth was finally mine to carry, alone but unbroken.